Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today Brian Taylor is back again. His website is brtaylormetaphysics.com. He has written several books. His main focus is astrology and how that influences us in our daily lives and in the big picture. So, Brian, welcome back.
It's great to be back. I think it's been about 2 months since we last spoke, and lots of things have happened since then.
Yeah, how are you holding up?
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thailand's pretty it's pretty normal actually. People
not
go
for the
out.
school children, what I have seen.
Well, they have to wear the face masks and
not only that, and then they put them into plastic covers during break time. Like a football goal. It has plastic on top, in front, at the side, and the kid is sitting at the wall, and then they shove this plastic thing all over them, and then they can sit there all by themselves and play. That is
that's a bit sad.
I'm very sorry.
Yeah, that's very sad. Yeah, I have no interaction with that side of the Thai life, so I wouldn't know. And the rest of what I see is relatively okay. Just the tourist industry's collapsed because no tourists are allowed in the country.
Yeah, but that is a huge chunk.
Yeah, it is a huge chunk in certain areas. Yeah, certain areas have been infected worse than others, but out in the provinces, I think life is relatively normal because they're just reliant upon each other, and it's an internal kind of economy.
Yeah. Okay, so last time we talked a lot about Jupiter and Saturn, and I was thinking I will ask you that. So I get it that the Jupiterian age is abundance, expansion, and jovial, and not that restrictive, but at the same time, we had two of the most horrible wars during the Jupiterian age. How does that go together?
Yeah, but the Jupiterian age was coming to an end. These ages only last about 2,000, well, only last, but they last about 2,160 years. And those terrible wars of the end of the 20th century, well, the beginning of the 20th century, they were in the Jupiterian age, but it's all part of the process, I would say, going through towards the next age in preparation, which is ruled by Saturn. So I'm going to try and explain in this presentation how it all fits together, because there's a metaphysical aspect to the Second World War, which very few people ever get to see. There's influences from external sources rather than just the physical realm. So I'm going to present you a slideshow, and we'll listen to it and pause it and reflect and debate, and we'll see how we go with it.
Okay.
The bar's gone at the bottom, good.
Why astrology is so important. The zodiac is essentially a clock, giving us a reference point, connecting our consciousness to the logos, the macrocosm and the microcosm. It is a benchmark which allows us to perceive aspects of the past from its profound elegance of transiting cosmic energies and cycles. Astrology is the oldest living language known to man. Babylonian astrology was the first organized system of astrology, arising in the 2nd millennium BC. There is speculation that astrology of some form appeared in the Sumerian period in the 3rd millennium BC. History. As the victors write the history books, they also massage previous known versions, selecting what suits them and deselecting what doesn't. The aim is to control the collective minds of its citizens, who passively accept what is referred to as official history. You could argue that the only certain thing about history is that it happened in the past. The rest is an official exercise in social engineering of the public consciousness. The greater the power and influence of the control system, the greater the potential for perverting and manipulating the truth. Every empire, kingdom, or dictator has in some way secured its power base on a glorified version of the past, aligning themselves with destiny and divinity. As they promote an impressive version of history designed to subordinate their citizens, who are taught to fear and respect their new all-powerful masters.
Okay, so you've got a little introduction there, because our history is written by the victors.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only really getting one version of history.
Yeah.
So this here is a clock. The zodiac is a clock. And it depicts various time periods. This is the great year of 26,000 years, bringing every single age or epoch into the equation. Now, if we divide that by 12, we get individual ages. And each age has a different flavor influencing the consciousness of humanity. And each age can also be divided down into another 12 houses, and so on until we get to the clock phase, the daily clock. 12 hours of the day and 12 hours of night. The reason why this is important is because this cannot lie about history. It's giving us a subtle yet sophisticated flavor of the past, the present, and the future. So if we look at this, the age of Pisces was ruled by Jupiter, and the age before Pisces was Aries, ruled by Mars. And if we go all the way back to the golden age of Leo, which was the golden age, ruled by the sun, this period was about 9,000 to 12,000 BC. The interesting part about this is when the time of Atlantis was purported to have taken place. This is when the Great Deluge was supposed to have happened, and there's evidence to support the Great Deluge, and there's evidence now to support an ancient civilization which has left us great monuments and relics of an age which was sophisticated.
But many say that Atlantis was not the perfect society, that there were warlords and all kinds of sinister things going on. What would you say?
Yes, that's possible. I mean, Plato talks about this in his Timaeus and Critias narrations of the time period, saying that it started off relatively smart and then descended into decadence and exactly what you're saying.
Would that have been towards the end of the Golden Age, the end of Leo?
Well, this is when there was a cataclysm, and it just reset the whole of society. So we have very little records of anything up to the beginning of the Aryan age, with the Sumerians and the Mesopotamians. Well, this is about 2000 BC. Everything else before then is very limited. We just have Göbekli Tepe in Turkey that's been uncovered. That's quite an interesting find. Got references to astrology that go back 12,000 years. So what I'm trying to get at here is this is a clock, and it's giving us an unbiased, untainted perspective of the past, present, and the future. Whereas our victors will write the history books in order to favor their perspective and their control over the new status quo. Let's continue.
What then is, generally speaking, the truth of history, a fable agreed upon? Napoleon Bonaparte. For my part, I consider that it would be found much better by all parties to leave the past to history, especially as I propose to write that history myself. Winston Churchill.
Here we have Pluto's Atlantis. I've just put a brief...
Plato's.
Yeah, sorry, Plato's Atlantis. Pluto. So he talks about one of his ancestors, Solon, who lived 200 years before Plato. And Solon went to Egypt and spent quite a considerable amount of time with the high priests in Athens, studying history and philosophy.
Plato's Atlantis. Plutarch tells of Solon's visit to Egypt, where he spent 10 years conversing with Egyptian high priests about philosophy and history. This credible philosopher and lawmaker from Athens was told by the high priests that you Athenians have no antiquity of history and no history of antiquity, and that human history goes back many thousands of years, even before the kingdoms of Egypt. They told him of an ancient civilization which lived out in the Atlantic on a great island, full of high culture and plenty. Solon, realizing the importance of this part of human history, began to record his new findings. Unfortunately, he died before he finished his work. Many years later, with the help of Solon's notes, Plato reconstructed his own view of Atlantis within his works of Timaeus and Critias.
So, the beauty about the Timaeus and Critias account of Atlantis is that Plato puts the date to 9000 BC. And if he was just making the whole story, he was surprisingly accurate with this time period, because this is the 12,000 years ago, which is 9000 BC, is the time period where a lot of scientists believe there was a massive cataclysm that reset the whole of society. Well, knocked us all back to the Stone Age. So you've seen this picture before. This is a diagram of the Piscean age, divided yet again into 12 houses of the zodiac. And then the last section of 180 years divided yet again into another 12 houses of the zodiac. And we're using a benchmark of 2012 as that transition point or period, which is taking us from Pisces into Aquarius. This is one of the reasons why we're going through this bizarre transition phase from an optimistic age into a pessimistic age.
Mm.
And if you look at this breakdown in the last 180 years, we find that the period of World War II is dominated by the subtle energies. These are just subtle energies influencing the time period. It's the subtle energies of Mars, the god of war, is playing a role during that period.
The economic history of Germany. Whereas Britain's share of world trade had declined between 1880 and 1913 from 38% to 30%, Germany's share had increased in the same period from 17 to 26%. Between 1890 and 1913, Germany's exports tripled, and by 1913, Germany's share of world manufacturing production was 14.8%, ahead of Britain's 13.6%. By 1913, America and German exports dominated the world steel market as Britain slipped into third place.
So here we see Germany, after Otto von Bismarck united your country in 1871. It propelled it and set the scene for a very impressive economy. And it got to the point where it started to threaten the British Empire. And the British were very reluctant to go into second or third place. So they felt it necessary to undermine their competitors. They always use divide and rule and do whatever's necessary to keep themselves in the prime, the leading position.
Science and technology in Germany. Germany has been the home of some of the most prominent researchers in various scientific disciplines, notably physics, mathematics, chemistry, and engineering. Before World War II, Germany had generated more Nobel laureates in scientific fields than any other nation, and was the leading country in the natural sciences. H.G. Wells, 1911. We in Great Britain are now intensely jealous of Germany. We are intensely jealous of Germany, not only because the Germans outnumber us and have a much larger and more diverse country than ours, and lie in the very heart and body of Europe, but because in the last 100 years, while we have fed on platitudes and vanity, they have had the energy and humility to develop a splendid system of national education, to toil at science and art and literature, to develop social organization, to master and better our methods of business and industry, and to clamber above us in the scale of civilization. This has humiliated and irritated rather than chastised us. How is it that one of them...
So, I recently made that video that we were discussing, promoting my German translated version of Metaphysics of World War II. And in this video, I put this question forward, and I didn't get a good response from YouTube.
Of course not.
Sophisticated countries in Europe, a country which, at that time, led the world in most sciences, technology, and industry, believed in the legend of Atlantis, and that their people were the purest descendants of those who survived the great deluge and cataclysm which devastated the earth 12,000 years ago. This was not just a war of economics and military superiority. It was also a war of ideologies, the Anglo-American version of human history against that of the Third Reich, the Ahnenerbe and the Nordic Aryans.
Some people say that the goal of Ahnenerbe was actually to justify their twisted racial ideas. Would you agree?
Well, to some extent, they got themselves in a particular position where they had to go and find some kind of substantial evidence in order to justify their theories. And yeah, that's very, that's a plausible explanation. But I think there are other reasons for it, and probably legitimate reasons for it as well. But even though they were barking up the wrong tree on a few things, in today's standards, they were still bringing in some of the border sciences, which a lot of people dismiss these days. So this was the video that was banned, and this is the reason YouTube gives. They call it hate speech. I mean, in your opinion, would you say that was hate speech?
No.
Just asking a question. So they're on very dodgy ground now. With their panel has decided this. Anyway, let's move forward. Atlantis house in Bremen in Germany. Have you been there?
No, but that, you know, this, I've seen pictures of it. And I have to say, here on the right-hand side, you can see that a little bit. It reminds me somewhat of a Scientology church.
Yes. Well, there was a lot of people interested in Atlantis and some of these ancient myths and legends in the interwar years. And so they built this this museum, lecture theatre and library dedicated to the study of Atlantis. It was bombed during the war, but it was refurbished. It wasn't completely destroyed, but they saved some of it, but they had to rebuild it afterwards. And it's still there today. Interesting note.
Alfred Rosenberg, leader of Office of Foreign Affairs, Nazi theorist and ideologue, an author of The Myth of the 20th Century.
Right here, it's not going to read it all. He's just going to go halfway down and start with, all in all, the old legends of Atlantis.
All in all, the oldest legends of Atlantis may appear in a new light. It seems far from impossible that in areas over which the Atlantic waves roll and giant icebergs float, a flourishing continent once rose above the waters, and upon it a creative race produced a far-reaching culture and sent its children out into the world as seafarers and warriors. But even if this Atlantis hypothesis should prove untenable, a prehistoric Nordic culture center must still be assumed. It is still uncertain where the prehistoric homeland of the Nordic race lies, as the South Atlanteans swarmed over North Africa and Southern Asia. So the North Atlanteans must have carried the sun god from Europe to Mesopotamia, even to the Sumerians, whose early calendar had once begun on the day of the winter solstice. The most recent investigations in Iceland and Scotland indicate a possible Stone Age immigration. The ancient Irish ideal of beauty was of milk-white skin and blonde hair. This was abandoned later with the arrival of a dark round-headed race.
You know what I find strange? that when it says there the Sumerian calendar started with the winter solstice, yeah,
Yeah.
the new year. I find it very irritating in general. We have the same thing, the start of the new year in the middle of winter. And to me, what would feel correct would be springtime, you know, with something with Aries. Everything starts in
Yeah.
Aries.
Well, that's what it used to be. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it used to be. It all started on March the 21st on the spring equinox. That was the old system, the old way of doing it. So that's interesting. But that's a whole nother subject in itself. So what is an Aryan? And I thought, does astrology give us any clues to what an Aryan is? Has it got any relation to Aries, the Aryan and the Aries? Well, let's see. Now, if we take the Earth as a globe, and some people think it's flat, but we're going to take it as a globe. And if we divide the whole globe into 12 houses of the zodiac, then each house occupies 30 degrees. And before the Greenwich Prime Meridian was introduced in the middle of the 19th century, many people used the pyramids at Giza as the prime meridian. It was the Giza prime meridian. So if we take the old prime meridian and go 30 degrees east, and that is our first sign of the zodiac. This is Aries, Iran. In Iran means the land of Aryan. This is the Persian Empire. It's the cradle of civilization, where the Sumerians begun and Mesopotamia. And it just so happens as a coincidence that the Sanskrit word Mesha means Aries and Potamia means rivers. So Mesopotamia is Aries rivers. Interesting. So the Persian Empire had its time, its heyday, about 500 BC, during the epoch or the age of Aries. So no, not only was it during the age of Aries, it was in the land of Aries. And I would suggest that what they were doing, they were creating three-dimensional Aryans in order to put them into battle, create an army. Because a lot of our military people, Aries, the sign of Aries, make good soldiers. Because they're ruled by the planet Mars. They're a cardinal fire sign, so they get up and go, firing with a lot of Mars energy. So if you wanted to make a good army and you understood how astrology worked, then you would have a great party on the summer solstice, and 9 months later you would be giving birth to a lot of little soldiers, little Aryans, three-dimensional Aryans. Born in March, the land of Aries, and also the epoch of Aries. You understand that? Okay. This is just a theory, of course. Now, Aries characteristics. The positive aspects of an Aries person are adventurous, courageous, versatile, lively, positive, and passionate. But there are negative traits with arrogance, stubbornness, impulsive, indisciplined, and confrontational. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I was married to an Aries. Mm.
Yeah, an Aries.
Yeah, he was from Kenya, so he wasn't hardly Aryan,
Wow.
but
We'll see about that.
born in the sign of Aries.
Oh, so you see, you can't have a three-dimensional Aryan anymore because we're not in the age of Aries. We can only have somebody born in the land of Aries and maybe the birth sign of Aries, a two-dimensional one. So, and it just so happens the Persian Empire, many of their kings' names began with AR.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a coincidence. I thought I would point it out. And so we have some other words beginning with AR, Aries, archaic, argumentative, architecture, aristocrat, archangel, archipelagos, artillery, army, arrow, very military orientated, arch enemies, articulate, arrest, arrogance, arc, archery, artist, arithmetic, arms, artifact, armored, aroused, blah, blah, blah. So you see where I'm going with this.
Mm-hmm.
So was your ex any of those?
What do you mean? Would I ask any of those?
Was your ex?
Oh, he, you know, it was a very weird combination psychologically. A covert narcissist plus developed an alcohol problem. So that was a combination that you cannot live with that.
No, not for long.
Yeah, exactly. And in deep denial as well.
Yes, okay. So this is the area I'm proposing where the initial Aryans came from, the land of Aryan, Iran. And then they spread out eastwards and westwards into Europe, creating various other races or sub-races. We also had the Nabatean kingdom in Petra in Jordan, which is in this part of the world. And you've probably seen the Petra temple. It's called the Treasury in some of the Hollywood movies. But they were they were influenced by astrology. And this is one of their god figures. This is a stone carving of one of their gods. And what does that look like to you?
That square head.
It's the symbol for Aries, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the way back to 300 BC.
The nose and the eyebrows, you mean, yeah? Especially.
Yes. The Iranian people were immune to the German racial Nuremberg laws because of their Aryan heritage. In 1935, the Shah asked the international community to refer to the country as Iran, land of Aryans, instead of its Western adopted name of Persia. In 1939, Germany gave the Iranians a library of over 7,500 books relating to German science, history, and the close relationship between the two Aryan cultures.
Now, this is interesting. These 7,500 books, what's happened to them? I mean, I would love to go and see these books and what's in them.
Do we even know where they are?
Well,
But so they are not somewhere displayed.
In Iran somewhere. And I'm sure who's going to go there to find them?
Yeah, maybe, you know, they ended up in a private collection. Who knows?
Yeah. But it'd be fascinating to somebody to do a detailed study of them, and it might lead them on some very bizarre rabbit holes.
During the 19th and 20th century, many scholars and academics were trying to make sense of inherited differences of human races by categorizing them into superior and inferior groups according to their biology and color. These were the days of colonialism and competing empires. It was part of an imperialistic mindset for economically successful nations to consider themselves as genetically superior to those less sophisticated, believing in some cases that their pure-blooded ancestors were descendants of demigods or even offspring of the ancient gods of Atlantis.
Yeah, and there is where it becomes a slippery slope.
That's right, but you see, Germany weren't the only ones doing it. The British Empire were the same. The French were the same. All the European nations, they all had a slant leaning towards this. I suppose you would call it white supremacist ideology, and they were all using different variations to support the theory. Different variations of Nordic, Aryan, different terminology. So it's a slippery slope. It only leads in one direction, and that's conflict.
Yeah, and extermination of others.
Well, that's
on the far end.
Yes, of course.
As Aryan is another reference to the Aryans. We have sub-races of Bulgarians, Hungarians, Tartarians, Bavarians, and Khazarians, all descendants of the Indo-Aryan root race. The word Aryavata appears in ancient Sanskrit literature relating to Indo-Aryan history, with Aryavata being the land of the Aryans, distinguishing it from the rest of the Indian subcontinent. Mars, being the god of war, was known as Mangala in Sanskrit, but sometimes he was linked to another war god known as Kartikeya or Skanda. Could Scandinavian be the source of the name Scandinavian? Although the German National Socialists wanted to label themselves as the pinnacle of modern civilization, they needed some scientific base to underpin their claims. Unfortunately, by the time they got into power, the Aryan concept meant different things to different people, having been adapted to suit various national and political racial policies. So they attempted to identify themselves as Germanic Nordic Aryans, taking all the good aspects of these three groups, remolding the German identity and raising the collective consciousness for the purpose of promoting national cohesion. By 1939, Hitler had advanced his Nordic theories towards a more general concept of the German Volk, having a superior spiritual quality which united them in destiny and providence. If we look closely at the old Sumerian Atrahasis...
Any comments on that?
No, that's pretty much what happened, yeah.
Right, we're going to talk about the old Sumerian Atrahasis flood creation story, because this is the oldest recorded creation story found on Earth, predating the Bible by 4,000 years.
Flood creation story. The oldest recorded creation story ever found on Earth, predating the Bible by 4,000 years. We find some incredible information. The Sumerians were a cultured civilization which seemed to spring up out of nowhere, producing the first writings, the first calendar, the first numerical system based on 12, and the first functioning government. They produced over 1 million clay tablets, recording all aspects of their day-to-day lives, along with their version of how man was created. They also credited the gods who lived among them for giving them knowledge concerning the solar system, writing, and the ability to calculate time. The important aspect of this account is its reference to the gods, who they called the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Numerous gods who created man to serve their needs here on earth. Anak or Anki is Old Hebrew for giants, and the Nephilim of the Bible means the fallen ones, those who from heaven to earth came. The Atrahasis is the basis and foundation of both the Bible's creation and flood story. Enki, the chief scientist god, can be seen holding a test tube, while Nintu holds up the finished product, the first man, mixed with blood and clay. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of
it. So that's interesting, because that talks about ancient civilization of the Sumerians mixing with the gods. And they talk about some kind of like genetically modified human. But they also say that they gave them a perspective of time and a numbering system based on 12. I mean, astrology, it's not the invention or the creation of a very primitive culture. You've got to be fairly well advanced in order to come up with this kind of profound wisdom. Just another mystery.
The word or name Adam is generally understood to mean the first man or human being. However, the Hebrew word Adam has another definition, and Strong's Bible Concordance lists both of them. Adam, to show blood in the face, i.e. flush, to turn rosy, be red, ruddy. Adam, a human being, an individual or a species, mankind, man, person. If the first man, Adam, was regarded as a red-faced person or someone with the capability of blushing or flushing red, then this narrows him down to a certain type of subspecies. Darwin described blushing as the most peculiar and most human of all expressions, normally exclusive to the white race.
Yeah, with the others you can't see that.
Anyway, they probably blush, but you just don't notice. Yeah. Oh. So what we have here is we've got the German Nordic Aryans thinking that they're superior race at the pinnacle of civilization. And you also have the Jews who see themselves as God's chosen people. So it was inevitable that there was going to be some kind of showdown, because the town wasn't big enough for both of them. So, now this is interesting. Let me just move this out the way a little bit. We've got one in German and one in English. These are all the 12 signs of the zodiac, divided into religions, because each religion has adopted one planet over all the others. I think we talked about it in the last discussion. So we've Buddhism, Mercury, Islam, Venus, Christianity, Jupiter, and Judaism, Saturn. So let's explain this. I'll just give a quick summary. The word Buddha with one D means the planet Mercury in Sanskrit. And if we start with the moon as the first day, because it's the first planet from the Earth. Then we have Wednesday as the third day. So Mercury and Buddhism, third day of the week, do 3 prostrations, 3 sticks of incense, and go around the temple 3 times.
On
They're
that
chosen.
note, I mean, just briefly, I once had a look at a table where there were listed the names of the planets in all languages. And if memory serves, the Sumerian word for Nibiru was Jupiter.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah.
Made
Or
a
the other
mental
way around, they call Jupiter Nibiru.
Well, it is a big planet, big gaseous giant. So there we have Mercury relating to Buddhism. We have Jupiter relating to Christianity. Jupiter Zeus, Jew Zeus. It's the glyph for Jupiter is the crescent over a cross, which is also in the shape of a number 4, the 4-pointed star of the cross. Jupiter's day is Thursday, the 4th day of the week. And because it's the crescent over the cross, Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my," what's that under there? "Kingdom is not of this world. It's in another place." Yeah. So Christianity is Jupiter. And then we have the Muslims with Venus. Venus is the 5th day of week, Viernes. They pray 5 times a day, adhere to the 5 pillars of Islam. And their first call to prayer is called the Fajr, when Venus comes up on the horizon at Mecca before the sun rises. Just a few coincidences there. And Judaism promotes Saturn above all the other planets. Saturn, of course, is the planet of control, restriction, tradition. It's the old father time and the teacher. It has a bizarre weather pattern in its north pole, which is a hexagonal weather pattern.
Yeah, but
So
that one is, yeah, how can I say that? You will see that at the Kaaba in Mecca as well.
Yes, of course, yeah. Yeah, that's another story. It's in one of my videos. But because of its hexagonal weather pattern, it's been synonymous with the number 6 and a black cube for many centuries. And when some Jews go to pray, they wear this thing called a tefillin, which is 2 black cubes connected by a leather strap. They put one black cube over their forehead, over their third eye, and another black cube on their subordinate arm. And then they wrap the strap around the arm, simulating the rings of Saturn. And they go all the way down the left hand and round the middle finger.
Yeah, that's the Saturnian finger.
Yes, each finger has a planet associated with it. And the middle finger is the Saturn finger. See, this is not just a coincidence.
He showed me the Saturnian finger.
It's the Saturn finger. So so we've got Jews, Saturn, and black cubes. So let's go back to this again. So we can see that Buddhism, which was an offshoot of Hinduism, is synonymous with Mercury And Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, the planet, the signs of I think and I examine, which is a very good description of the philosophy of Buddhism.
Yeah.
I think and I examine. Now, the Muslims, Islam, Taurus and Libra, I have and I complement. I mean, there's a lot of perverted propaganda about the Muslims at the moment, going around, stemming from the West. So they don't paint a very good picture of the Muslims. But this chart doesn't lie. Astrology cannot lie. All it can do is give you a perspective of our conscious connection to the Logos and the universal consciousness. Okay, so Christianity, Pisces and Sagittarius, I believe and I seek. Very much two things relating to Christianity. Judaism, Aquarius and Capricorn, I know and I use. In Judaism, been associated with usury, I use for a very long time. They're also great scholars because from a very early age, they are taught scholarly methods and how to advance in a scholarly nature. So they very wise. You want to know something, ask a Jew. So the only odd one out here is we don't have a religion for Aries and Scorpio. So maybe once upon a time, a long time ago, this has been taken out of our history books. Something that we are not allowed to talk about or know about is there was a religion. There was a religion related around Mars and Aryanism. Tartarians, the Persian Empire, blah, blah, blah. We know a little about that, but we don't know a lot about some aspects of our history. And I suspect some of this has been eradicated. Mars.
Where does this I feel belong to?
Wait a minute, let's go back again. Oh yeah, the moon. The moon, these are monks. Monks are moon watchers. All monks follow moon cycles. It's their duty to record the moon cycles, and they meditate according to different moon cycles. So you could say that's a religion in its own right. That's some form of religion. And the sun, well, there's plenty of evidence of different sun worshipping religions. I've just named the Pharaonic one as an example. So we are lacking an Aryan religion. If you get,
I get it. Yeah.
So what is this? What is this? This is what the old Nazi salute represents. It's the glyph for Mars, and the glyph for Mars is a circle pointing in a specific direction. The circle represents the focal consciousness, and the arrow is the physical realm going in a specific direction. You're focusing your will in a specific direction. This is the Mars, proactive energy. So here we have a closer look at Aquarius and Capricorn, synonymous with Judaism, because they promote Saturn above all the other planets. And Saturn, in the old version of astrology, rules both a Capricorn and Aquarius. And the 10th, Capricorn is the 10th house of career. And Jews are very career-orientated people. The 11th house is groups and friends and long-term projects. You have groups and friends of Israel, and they do have a long-term project. So, just another reference point. Jupiter and Saturn, of course, we've already mentioned this, they are polar opposites of each other in characteristics. One's optimistic, the other's pessimistic, abundance, restrictive. So they are, this is where the whole concept of Jesus and Satan comes from, battling each other. They're just personified characters of the planets. And the glyphs, of course, it's the cross over the crescent, spirituality over the physical, whereas Saturn is the physical over the spiritual. I mean, a lot of people do say that Judaism is a very materialistic religion. I mean, Karl Marx perverted the old Hegelian dialectic to create the material dialectic. And the material dialectic, of course, is all part of a communist mindset where you've got rid of religion. Because the initial Hegelian dialectic, you brought a creator into the equation. You had stimulation and influence from a divine consciousness. Whereas Karl Marx just took that out of the equation as an atheistic approach, give you a material dialectic. And it all stems from Saturn. So Saturn rules the new age of Aquarius. So this is very important because it tells you what we're going into, what kind of energy, subtle cosmic energy differences and influences we are moving towards. Because this is a big clock. So the British Empire. Now, the reason why the British Empire became so successful is because it was a joint venture between the British monarch and the banking cartel, predominantly part of the Rothschilds. So the British Empire was financed by the Rothschilds, and wherever the British Empire went, they would install a Rothschild central bank, and they would mutually work together, and they built this phenomenal empire. And this is the globalization project. It's been underway for about 250 years. And if anybody comes in its way, they're going to get dealt with. Nobody can stand in its way. No, nobody can stand in its way. So we know all about the Rothschilds. Well, there's plenty of information out there on the Rothschilds. But not a lot of people know about what Zionism is. Zionism is it's a philosophy or an ideology on the re-establishment of the Jews back to the homeland, the re-establishment of Israel. The Jews going back to their homeland in Israel. And this goes back a long way. It goes back even to the Napoleonic times. Napoleon even had a plan to send the Jews back into the promised land. But because the British saw him off in Waterloo, he wasn't able to fulfill his plans. And the British thought it was a good idea, so they pursued it. And these are some of the fathers of Zionism. Lord de Rothschild, Lionel de Rothschild, Benjamin Disraeli, and Lord Shaftesbury.
In 1840, Colonel Charles Henry Churchill, a British Army officer, diplomat, and a distant relative of Winston Churchill, championed the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine. he put together a plan for the concept of Zionism from the British consulate in Damascus under Lord Palmerston's Foreign Office, half a century before Theodore Herzl appeared on the scene. Britain was under pressure to survive and to keep its empire intact. They were convinced they had no other option but to destroy their competitors. The globalization plan of the international financiers was in jeopardy. Unable to compete on a level footing, Britain and the financiers set about using diplomacy and secret treaties designed to completely encircle Germany within a wall of steel for potential future provocation. The only reason World War I didn't break out earlier was because the Federal Reserve System was not in place. It had to be set up prior to the big war in order to control the vast amounts of borrowing which would be needed for the conflict. Finally, with everything ready, only 6 months after the creation of the Fed, on the 28th of June 1914, the match was lit. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria triggered the mobilization and eventual slaughter of millions of young men, innocent men who had no idea what they were really fighting for. Even though the conflict began in Sarajevo, the focus soon shifted to the real target, and it wasn't long before the gates of Hades were opened and all guns pointed to Germany. The Germans...
Right, this guy here, Benjamin Friedman, he's an American Jewish businessman and writer. And he talks about how Germany had almost won the war in 1916. He did a speech in 1961 at the Willard Hotel. Now, this is an interesting perspective.
Submarines, which were a surprise to the world, had swept all the convoys from the Atlantic Ocean, and Great Britain stood there without ammunition for her soldiers, stood there with 1 week's food supply facing her, and after that, starvation. At that time, the French army had mutineered. They lost 600,000 of the flower of French youth in the defense of Verdun on the Somme. The Russian army was defecting. They were picking up their toys and going home. They didn't want to play war anymore. They didn't like the Tsar, and the Italian army had collapsed. Now Germany, not a shot had been fired on the German soil. Not an enemy soldier had crossed the border into Germany. And yet, here was Germany offering England peace terms. They offered England a negotiated peace on what the lawyers called a status quo ante basis. That means let's call the whole war off and let everything be as it was before the war started. Well, England in the summer of 1916 was considering that, seriously. They had no choice. It was either accept this negotiated peace that Germany was magnanimously offering them, or go on with the war and be totally defeated. Dear Lord Rothschild.
So have you heard that before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it gives another perspective because England was at the point where it was about to lose. So what they did was they asked for the help from the Rothschilds in order to get America on board, because the Rothschilds were very, very powerful and they had their fingers in many, many different pies. Control of the media, control of many aspects of government, the banking cartel, blah, blah, blah. And if they couldn't pay for the way out of this predicament, then nobody could help the British. And as a payback, the British were supposed to give them the Zionist Federation, Palestine. So America enters the war in April 1917.
Wasn't there an incident with this ship, Lusitania, that allegedly was sunk by the Germans?
That was right. I think that was in 1915. That was a couple of years before. And that was also under Winston Churchill's lookout, because he was the Lord of the Admiralty. And the captain of the Lusitania was under the impression that the British Navy was going to escort him into Britain. When he got to the coast of Ireland, he was waiting for an escort from the British. So he slowed down in order to, waiting for these ships. But also, it was well known that many ships had been torpedoed out of the water, and there was a U-boat in the area. Churchill knew this, and he was waiting for. Basically, it was hoping for the worst in order to give more impetus for America to join the war. The German High Command at the time even put an advert alongside the White Star Line's advert for the passage of the ship for passengers, warning them that they're taking their lives in their own hands. It's a dangerous voyage to go on, and there's a chance that you might not make it, basically. So at least they had the common decency to do that before torpedoing the ship. But they also reckon that it was carrying a hell of a lot of munitions because there was a huge explosion after the initial torpedo. Anyway, so what happened was the Rothschilds demanded this agreement in writing. And so Lord Balfour had to give them this agreement, which is called the Balfour Declaration.
I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours sincerely, Arthur James Balfour.
Your camera's just dropped. I could just see the top of your head.
Okay.
So,
better now, yeah?
Yes. So then the World War I ends, and they have the Treaty of Versailles, which slaps all the reparations, blames Germany for everything. Even though Germany didn't start the war, it was blamed for everything and made to pay for everybody, which was insane, really. It was going to lead to a future problem, which I think was part of the ammunition of the British in order to keep Germany under the jackboot of the British Empire and not allow them to get too strong sometime in the future. So they also chopped up Germany into lots of various different new countries.
The Marx dramatic.
In order to create future provocations like the Danzig situation and the Rhineland, blah, blah, blah. And then after the Treaty of Versailles, the private banks, the banksters were allowed back into Germany, and they took over control of the Reichsbank, which then plundered the country financially from within using hyperinflation.
Devaluation began soon after the Reichsbank was privatized, or delivered to private investors. Dr. Schack, Hitler's Reich Bank president, The Magic of Money, 1967. The German government was not responsible for the post-war hyperinflation. It was Germany's privately owned central bank and its monopoly on the country's money creation. Money created as a circulating note of debt that created the problem. Germany's economy was crushed and devastated by the bankers. The Bolshevik Revolution
So you were aware of the situation with the hyperinflation,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
yeah.
how the banks manipulated the situation in order to destroy all the wealth within your country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there was a lot of industrialists, a lot of very rich people that developed very successful businesses and enterprises after Otto von Bismarck had unified the country. And because it was a threat to the British Empire's prime position, they went to town on the finances of the nation. And why this was happening, at the end of the First World War, 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution took place. They overthrew the Tsar and killed him and his family, and then started the Soviet Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution.
Mm.
actually was financed by wealthy financiers in London and New York. Lenin and Trotsky were on the closest of terms with these moneyed interests, both before and after the revolution.
So that's an interesting perspective.
I thought about something just now. The decision to nationalize this library was made by the first Soviet government, whose composition was 80 to 85%. Vladimir Putin, 2013.
So this is another twist in the tale, because if you look at the hammer and sickle, it's very similar to the cross over the crescent of Saturn. It's a play on it, because it's not the sickle and the hammer. It's the hammer and the sickle. It's that way round. And it was the communist revolution was 80 to 85% Jewish, and they were financed by the Wall Street and London backers. Now that adds a real twist, doesn't it?
Yep.
Because this Bolshevik communism is really a weapon used by the banking cartel in order to bring humanity under their total control. They could only implement it in certain countries which had weak democracies. And at the time, the Tsar was weak, and so he was taken out. But communism was spreading. It was spreading all over. And those weak democracies went down. So here we see the new post-World War I center of Europe, where Germany was taken back, very small borders. East Prussia was isolated. You've got Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Rhineland. So there's great potential for the future of friction if Germany ever wants to unite again.
The Great Depression of the 1930s, which was engineered by international finance, turned many people against democracy, towards the swelling ranks of those looking for solutions in either communism or fascism. In 1922, Achille Ratti, freshly appointed cardinal, had been the surprise choice to succeed Pope Benedict XV. He took the name Pius XI. Later that same year, amid widespread violence, Benito Mussolini the 39-year-old fascist leader became Italy's prime minister. Since then, the two men had come to depend on each other. The dictator relied on the Pope to ensure Catholic support for his regime, providing much-needed moral legitimacy. The Pope counted on Mussolini to help him restore the Church's power in Italy.
So what you've got the Pope and the Catholic Church. They're feeling threatened by this expansive communist Bolshevism.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought we need to do something about this. So in my view, they promoted some of the fascist dictators throughout Europe in order to bring a nationalist counteraction to the spread of communism. And the first dictator, of course, was Mussolini in Italy. So they started in their own country. Because the Catholic Church, of course, is Jupiter. They're the opposite of Saturn. Communism is atheistic. It was destroying all the religions. I think it had outlawed.
But when you look at the Jesuits, for instance, you have many atheists among them. And maybe some of them were on board with this Bolshevik revolution.
What you mean, working for the other side?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly, because
because if you dig deep enough, they usually have their fingers in everything.
Yeah. Well, in my view, the Catholic Church has been infested by Freemasons, and the Freemasons and the Freemasons have been infested by Catholic Church's influence. Each side has been trying to undermine the other one since the conception of the Freemasons. But we shall see. Let's continue.
In 1931, an anti-Catholic Republican government came to power in Spain. They secularized education and prohibited religious education in schools. They also turned over all church property to the state. This, among other things, helped trigger the Spanish Civil War, a brutal war between the legitimately elected Republican government and nationalist dictator Francisco Franco. The nationalists had a powerful ally, the Catholic Church, and the war was seen by many as a new crusade. A concordat was signed between the Pope and Germany in 1933, securing the rights of the Church within the Reich. Hitler saw this as the Catholic Church's approval of his regime, which gave him international respectability.
Now then, we have another player in the game. This is where it starts to get interesting. Now, the age of Aquarius in old astrology is ruled by Saturn alone.
Mm-hmm.
But since the rediscovery of the planet Uranus, modern astrologers have positioned or given Uranus the rulership for the first 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Uranus is the planet of rebellion, revolution, new technology, out of the blue events, sometimes of a violent nature. So Jupiter had its personified ambassador of Jesus. Saturn had its personified ambassador, Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And so Uranus is going to need a personified ambassador or messiah for this new age. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
With all the characteristics of Uranus. Now then, Uranus has two glyphs. put us up there. It's got two glyphs. It has, and they both mean the same thing from a metaphysical perspective. You have the circle with the cross pointing to the heavens. And this is the focal consciousness pointing to the heavenly realms, which gives you providence. It's the physical blood pointing to the heavens, providence over the focal consciousness. The other symbol is the cross. With either side, you have the crescent of spirituality. So it's the physical blood and spiritual providence over the focal consciousness. You get that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what does this glyph look like? Do you think it looks like this? Possibly. Now, we also have this. Now, this is just a coincidence. I've just thrown this in there as a bit of a, to lighten the mood. But it seems that Hitler has that, both these Uranus glyphs on his hat.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Maybe
he's the new kid on the block.
He's the new Messiah.
Mm.
He's the Messiah representing, this is what these guys thought. These guys thought this. It doesn't matter what we think, it's what they thought.
Mm.
They thought Hitler was the new Messiah, bringing in the new age of Aquarius, which lasts for 1,000 years. This was your 1,000-year Reich.
Mm-hmm. But actually it took place at the end of Pisces.
Yes, of course.
Mm.
But Jesus took place before, he was born before the start of the Piscean age.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not perfectly aligned. It's just the knock-on effects as history unfolds. So what we have here, we have the symbol for Aquarius, which is very similar to the SS symbol, and you can break that down and create the swastika, of course. But there's more stuff like that in my book. Now, who's this? Oh yeah, General Karl Wolff, and he gives you his little point here in a book.
Nazis' top generals, Karl Wolff, was reflecting on his many conversations with Heinrich Himmler. He noted his theory that Himmler was trying to keep most of his evil deeds away from the knowledge of the Führer. Very much deeply involved in the occult, Himmler saw Hitler as the new Messiah. Based on conversations the Führer had in general with the Reichsführer, he had decided to relieve the burdens from the shoulders of the new Messiah, Adolf Hitler. The Führer was to remain free from sin. During his 12 years of power, astoundingly, he...
No, it's okay. But we see that time and again with political figures. Remember when Obama ran the first time? Oh my goodness, you could have the impression the Messiah himself is coming.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah, they like to align themselves with divinity.
Mm-hmm.
But some people also, the general public, some people see it that way and they can get bowled over by it.
Yeah.
Trade places with Christ, convincing mainstream followers and his inner circle, for example, Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels and SS leader Heinrich Himmler, that it was he who was their Messiah. Hitler was their savior who promised to renew the myth of the Holy Empire, a Reich which would last 1,000 years. Many Germans found a Messiah in the person of Hitler to lead them into the 1,000-year reign, and it wasn't Jesus Christ. With Hitler as their surrogate Messiah, the ideology of the Third Reich evolved into a national theology. The gospel of this new Nazi church demonized the Jews and other minorities in the name of God, which guaranteed kingdom come of the Third Reich.
So here we have
That is
Uranus.
why I always say stay away from savior programs.
Yeah. Yeah. Stay away from big government. We want small government. Small. Oh. So here's Uranus. It's the planet of revolution, rebellion, new technology, breaking with tradition, dictatorship. It's forward-looking and progressive. Out of the blue events, sometimes violent. Now, who does that remind you of?
What do you mean?
Well, Uranus seems to have very similar attributes
Yeah,
to the German
okay,
socialist.
the German National Socialist Party, yeah, but honestly, I have to see, I see the same shit happening right now.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. We're coming
Okay.
to that. We're coming to that because we are now in the age of Aquarius, so it's ruled by this planet, and we're getting all this now. These guys were just getting ready for it. They were preparing because they wanted their 1,000-year Reich. They were projecting 1,000 years into the future, which is exactly how long Uranus lasts as the ruler of the age. And then Saturn takes over, of course. So here we have it. We have the National Socialists aligning themselves with Uranus, while the Judaism is aligning itself with Saturn. Cross over the crescent, the spirit and physical blood, providence, over the focal consciousness. I mean, this might sound really far-fetched, but just bear with me.
The ancient Greek myth talks about Uranus imprisoning Gaia's youngest children deep within the earth. This did not sit well with Gaia. She made a sharp sickle from flint and asked her sons to castrate their father. Only Kronos, the youngest, was willing to perform the gruesome task. Kronos is also known as the planet Saturn. He ambushed his father and after castrating him, threw his parts into the sea. From the blood which fell to the earth came the giants of old, and from his testicles came Aphrodite. This ultimately concludes with the story of David and Goliath, where David finally puts an end to the giants. Both Saturn and David are synonymous with Judaism.
And this is a Bible. This is about in Revelations 27. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're referring to this period here.
When Saturn takes over again.
Yeah. Saturn takes over again and then rules the rest of the Aquarian age and the rest of the Capricorn age. Because don't forget, the majority of religious texts and religion is based on astrotheology. This is the clock, and it doesn't tell lies. Oh.
Throughout the Piscean age, ruled by Jupiter, the planet of optimism, good fortune and abundance, an opposing energy cast its shadow over the whole epoch. This shadow, of course, was Saturn. Both these planets, personified ambassadors, Jesus and Satan, battled against one another for 2,000 years. Because of this, Jews suffered greatly all over Europe and found themselves at the receiving end of many social problems. Just as Capricorn is depicted as a goat, the Jews became scapegoats, blamed for their religious practices and connection to Saturn. Disapproval towards Jews escalated because invariably they would honor Jewish law over Gentile governments. Throughout the Piscean age, the Jews were expelled from many European countries.
So here's a list the Piscean age where the Jews have been expelled. So they had a very rough time over that period. I would say primarily because they're aligning themselves with a planet that is the polar opposite of Jupiter. And if the Catholic Church is the dominant religion, they're going to be anti-Semitic. And so I would say this is one of the main reasons for the expulsions.
In the November federal elections of 1932, the National Socialists were the largest party within the Reichstag parliament. Consequently, with reluctance, Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor, forming a new cabinet on the 30th of January 1933. One of the first objectives of the new cabinet was to take back control of the banking system away from the private sector, which was ultimately controlled by a small clique of international financiers. Due to the Reichstag fire, which was blamed on the communists, who were at that time taking their orders from Moscow, failure of the federal elections in early March to establish an overall majority, Hitler called on the Reichstag to vote for the Enabling Act, which would ultimately give him dictatorial powers.
Okay, at the same time that the Reichstag was voting for the Enabling Act, a British headline, the 24th of March 1933, put forward this headline: Judea declares war on Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Jews,
that one I know.
Yeah, Jews all around the world unite in action, boycott of German goods, mass demonstrations in many districts, dramatic action. So they knew what was coming. They knew how anti-Semitic the Nazi Party was, and so they thought they would declare war on Germany first. This was an economic measure, of course, because they were only a small group of wealthy people.
Yeah, but these days, when if a country says we are going to boycott Israel, they freak out.
Yeah, of course. Yes. So 1 week later, we have the brown shirts or whatever, the Nazi police. They go around and they mark all the Jewish businesses with notices to deter the German people from doing business with them, because this was an economical showdown.
Yeah.
But in our mainstream history, we only see this side. We don't see what the Jews did in order to promote this backlash. We just see this, saying, well, this is what they did. But there was a reason behind it, and you've just seen the reason for it.
Once Hitler had freed Germany's banks from the parasitical clutches of international financiers, he was able to reinvest all the money saved back into the German economy, expanding growth. This quickly propelled Germany from one of the poorest countries in Europe into one of the richest in just a few short years. However, this created two major problems for the international financiers, who already had the majority of the world's economies under their control. The first was that Germany's new prosperity, free from the shackles of debt, would only go from strength to strength. The second was that if the rest of the world, or at least those who thought they had an honest monetary system, found out what a scam they were living under, may also want to follow the German example by throwing out those banks who were keeping them in the trap of perpetual debt. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford. The Nazis came to power in 1933, when the German economy was in total collapse, with ruinous war reparations, obligations, and zero prospects for foreign investment or credit. Through an independent monetary policy of sovereign credit and a full employment public works program, the Third Reich was able to turn a bankrupt Germany, stripped of overseas colonies, into the strongest economy in Europe within 4 years, even before armament spending began. Germany issued debt-free and interest-free money from 1935 on, which accounts for Germany's startling rise from the Depression to a world power in 5 years. The German government financed its entire operations from 1935 to 1945 without gold and without debt. It took the entire capitalist and communist world to destroy the German Revolution and bring Europe back under the heel of the bankers. Over the next 5 years, the National Socialists managed to transform Germany from a defeated, bankrupt husk into one of the most powerful military nations on the planet. Within 2 years, the 5.6 million German unemployed had been reduced by 50%. Furthermore, by 1938, there were only 400,000 unemployed. This transformation was felt all around the world, known as the German miracle. Time magazine even nominated Adolf Hitler as Man of the Year for 1938. Germany's success put a huge amount of pressure on the future aspirations of international finance, who had for many years aligned itself with the British Empire as a joint project, mutually benefiting one another. They could see that if they allowed Germany to continue down this road, their days of rule were numbered. The only thing which would save them was the total destruction of Germany and the complete eradication of its version of independent National Socialism. It was clear from the start that any form of negotiation was out of the question between these two opposing sides. The stakes were high. The bankers not only needed to see the total eradication of Hitler's Germany, but they needed a British leader who was prepared to sacrifice everyone and everything for the overall objectives of a handful of powerful men.
Yeah, I have to say, you know, what they did with the banks and bringing Germany out of the rubble back as a player, that's actually a brilliant idea. And it puzzles me how, on the one hand, this individual that's actually quite smart and yeah, well, he did not do that alone, of course, but then he and his inner circle, they went completely overboard with their twisted ideas. I really don't get it, how that goes together.
Yeah, well, they just wouldn't compromise, and they just wouldn't play ball with the international financial system, which, although it was, somebody's got to control it. Somebody has to be in charge of this international financial system. And if anybody is going to opt out of that and go it alone, then they don't have the compounding debt, which keeps them within a sphere of everyday wealth. It limits their expansion.
I get that, but on the other hand, you know, what they did, not only to other people, but also to their own people in terms of oppression and how dare you to think in a different way, that's really horrible.
Yeah, exactly. But it's quite strange in the two most sophisticated countries, which was at the time, which was Japan and Germany, they both decided to rebel against the international financial system. And they threw everything they could at it. And they used their people, of course, as the foot soldiers in order to implement their rebellion. So it was a big showdown. There was a lot at stake. And England knew it was finished, and the financial system knew it was finished if they won. So we go to the trigger point, the Danzig here. I mean, this was the trigger point which caused the declaration of war, and it was set up this way. The Britain, after the Treaty of Versailles, set it up this way because they knew that this would ultimately give them the excuse then to declare war on Germany. Because it wasn't Germany, of course, declaring war on them. All they wanted to do was unite the German-speaking people, there was a lot of Germans being attacked at this time by the Poles. There was a lot of unrest. So they had to find a solution, and they offered one solution, which was to build a big motorway over the top of Poland to bring the two together. But the Poles, because the Poles had the British guarantee, they would not come to some compromise. And so it ended up with the showdown. The Germans eventually marched in there.
September came, the situation had indeed become insufferable. You know the course of events in August. In spite of this, I hold that without a British guarantee and the agitation of those apostles of war, it might well have been possible to reach an agreement in these last days. At one particular point, England itself attempted to bring about direct talks between us and Poland. I was willing. The Poles, however, failed to show up naturally. I sat with my government in Berlin for 2 days and waited and waited. On the 1st of September, Germany sent troops into Poland, triggering Britain and France into declaring war a few days later. While Germany invaded from the west and south, the Soviet Union on the 17th of September joined the attack on Poland from the east. By the 6th of October, all was lost. Poland had surrendered and the country was divided, with Western Poland going to Germany and Eastern Poland being swallowed up by Stalin's Bolsheviks. It is also worth pointing out that when Germany seized around 100,000 square miles of Poland, the British in the same year seized 218,000 square miles in other parts of the world, expanding their own empire.
Yes, a lot of people don't realize that it was a joint venture, the attack on Poland, between the Soviet Union and the Germans. And England and France declared war on Germany, but they became allies with the Soviet Union for undertaking the same invasion, which is very bizarre. There's an ulterior motive behind this. They wanted Germany again. That was the reason.
Now the international financiers had their war declaration. They just needed their war man, a man who they had been financing and keeping afloat for years, ready to push for war with Germany at all costs. As First Lord of the Admiralty, Churchill called for the mining of Norway's waters, followed by an invasion to secure major ports which Germany needed for vital supplies of iron ore. The Norway campaign was quickly put together, leaving a great deal of room for error. Unfortunately for the Allies, the Germans beat them to it. Before the invasion, Norway was a neutral country, which suited Germany because it was still able to trade with its ports and manufacturing centres. However, Churchill was happy to invade this neutral country while condemning Germany for doing the same to Poland. Churchill's plans to invade were leaked to the German High Command, allowing them to get there first. The irony of this disastrous Norway campaign was that although it was Churchill's idea, the Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain took most of the flak, and as a result was asked to resign, only to be replaced by yours truly, Winston Churchill, on the 10th of May 1940. Chamberlain was not a warmonger. He tried all he could to keep the peace and prevent any big military showdowns, whereas Churchill was the opposite, and those who financed him knew this. Now they had their man in the driving seat. It was only a matter of time until the gates of hell were opened. Churchill's finances.
So, you're going to learn all about Churchill now. There's an aspect of Churchill which a lot of people don't know. He was he wasn't very good with money, and he kept going bankrupt, well, on the verge of bankruptcy most of his life.
Mm.
And he was reliant on external sources to finance his extravagant lifestyle.
After his father died in 1895, his mother gave him an allowance from the trust which had been set up for her. This annual allowance was equivalent to around $60,000 in today's money. At this point, one of Randolph Churchill's friends steps into the picture to offer Winston his services in relation to the management of his financial affairs. Ernest Joseph Cassel, a Prussian-born Ashkenazi Jew, became a wealthy banker and capitalist after he moved to Britain around 1869. He gained a credible reputation within London's financial institutions, equaling that of the Rothschilds. He looked after the financial affairs of the Prince of Wales, later to become Edward VII. When Randolph died, he thought it necessary to look after Winston's affairs too, free of charge. In 1920, Churchill overextended himself on the purchase of 2 properties. He leaned on Cassel for financial assistance, which came forthwith. Fortunately for Churchill, Cassel died a year later, and his executors never asked for the money back. In 1921, a surprise inheritance materialized from a distant relative over in Ireland as part of the old aristocracy. His relative left him the equivalent of $5 million in today's money. Delighted at this, both Churchill and his wife Clementine breathed a huge sigh of relief, believing their money worries were over. However, by 1925, most of that money had gone on extravagant living, gambling, and excessive drinking. Churchill's debts really began to spiral out of control throughout the wilderness years of the 1930s. Having no ministerial position, he relied mainly on his writing and public appearances. This was nowhere near enough to hold his position, and he sank further into debt. According to David Irving, during these wilderness years, a secret slush fund known as the Focus was created by a small selection of London's wealthiest businessmen who had ties to the Board of Jewish Deputies in England, led by Sir Bernard Wally Cohen. The group was set up as a countermeasure against the rise of German National Socialism. Irving states that the focus group continued to finance Churchill during the 30s, while he promoted anti-German rhetoric along with warnings associated with Germany's rise in power. By March 1938, around the same time Germany annexed Austria, Churchill was once again in danger of bankruptcy. He turned to an old friend, Brendan Bracken, for help, a Conservative MP, businessman and founder of the modern version of the Financial Times. Brendan Bracken had many contacts in the business and banking world, and was able to arrange a meeting for Churchill with a wealthy admirer by the name of Henry Strakosch. Strakosch was an Austrian-born Jewish banker, businessman, and economist who became a British citizen in 1907. By this time, Strakosch was an old but very wealthy bachelor, admired Churchill's stance on Germany and thought it necessary to keep Churchill afloat and in the political game. He signed a check over to Churchill for the equivalent of $1 million in today's money, with no repayment requirements necessary. When Churchill became Prime Minister in 1940, his salary doubled to £10,000, $500,000 in today's money. This was still nowhere near enough to keep him afloat. At that time, he had the bank manager and creditors knocking on his door for an immediate payment for interest on his £5,600 overdraft, $280,000 in today's money. Once again, Henry Strakosch stepped forward with another check, clearing Churchill's overdraft. Strakosch died in October 1943, leaving Churchill the equivalent of £1 million in today's money, plus the cancellation of a loan. The need for Churchill to rely on outside sources to support his out-of-control spending habits is worrying, because the opportunity for abuse of power of the individual is greatly increased. The borrower is always slave to the lender. There is no compromise in this fact. The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. In July 1922, Zionism came under threat in the House of Lords. They were unhappy about the Jewish proposal to build a power plant on the Jordan River, saying it would be a threat to Arab rights and that the Zionist project would become a burden to the British taxpayer. The Lords voted 60 to 29 to abolish the mandate and nullify the Balfour Declaration. Churchill stepped in and delivered a tremendous speech in the House of Commons, which effectively stopped the Lords' motion from going any further towards undermining Zionism.
So, see, it was one of Churchill's distant relatives that started the whole push through the British system of Zionism. And he's a very staunch Zionist himself, because he's being financed by a lot of the Zionist bankers. So he has a duty to them. He owes them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this happens at this point. This is the 13th of May. This is his first speech in the House of Commons. This is 3 days after the Blitzkrieg by the German army to push west and to take over the countries west of the Rhineland. So he gives this speech.
I would say to the House, as I said to those who have joined this government, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat. We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. We have before us many, many long months of struggle and of suffering. You ask, what is our policy? I will say, it is to wage war by sea, land and air, with all our might and with all the strength that God can give us, to wage war against a monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark catalogue of human crime. This is our policy. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word. It is victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory, however long and hard the road may be, for without victory, there is no survival. Winston Churchill, 1940. Victory at all costs was Churchill's position, which ultimately means no negotiation No compromise, no dialogue, just war. To take it to its ultimate conclusion, it means the potential end of Western civilization and the deaths of every man, woman and child in Europe, the Commonwealth and possibly the world. A war to defend and uphold Churchill's view of empire, for without victory there is no survival. This part of the speech no doubt refers to the empire and international finance, because a negotiated peace could also bring about the survival of millions on all sides. However, it would inevitably undermine the hegemony of the British Empire, the banking cartel, and the loss of Churchill's luxury aristocratic lifestyle. Churchill was seen as at the most brutal and brutish end of the British imperialist spectrum. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin was warned by cabinet colleagues not to appoint him because his views were so antediluvian. Churchill will write his name in history. Take care he does not write it in blood. Lord Robert Cecil once wrote that he believed Churchill took no interest in politics unless it involved the chance of a little bloodshed. To achieve the extirpation of Nazi tyranny, there are no lengths of violence to which we will not go, Winston Churchill.
Now you can see what they were up against.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't going to give an inch. And they knew that. These financial backers knew he was going to go all out. And I think the German high command realized the situation now, and it just escalated out of control. So it brought the worst out in everybody. This is interesting. Uranus, Blitzkrieg, lightning war. It means lightning war, correct?
Yes.
Okay, Uranus is the god of the skies.
You know, in German, actually, Blitzkrieg, the emphasis is on the idea that it's extremely fast.
Yeah. Uranus and his unique role in Greek mythology. The Greeks did revere the shock and awe power of Uranus, mythologically representing the very first lightning bolt, creating the universe out of nothing. Another coincidence with Uranus there.
I just have to ask, because it's bothering me the entire time. Uranus, you know, is that a coincidence that you could also read it your anus?
It depends how you pronounce it. It's actually Uranus.
Yeah.
Uranus. What of many jokes. Now this gets interesting here. Remember we talked about the prime meridian at Giza. And each 30 degrees is a different sign of the zodiac. Now it doesn't matter if we use the prime meridian at Giza or the prime meridian at Greenwich, because they're only 31 degrees apart. So we're only talking about 1 degree difference. All we're doing is chopping this part of Europe up into the houses, 12 houses of the zodiac. And
the planet of interest is Pluto, the slowest of all the moving planets, representing transformation, change, death, and rebirth. It takes between 14 and 30 years to move from one sign to another. Coincidentally, Pluto can be seen over eastern France during World War I, and again over Germany during World War II.
Can you see this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is Pluto as it moves through the zodiac. As it moves around the zodiac, it takes between 14 and 30 years to move from one sign into the other. In July 1914, it just happens to be over the border between France and Germany. And in 1933 to 1945, it was over the center of Germany. Germany, Italy, Norway, blah, blah, blah. Now, it's about to move into this area of Aquarius. So, what does that mean?
Carl Ernst Kraft was a Swedish astrologer born in Basel at the turn of the 20th century. Kraft was one of the first astrologers to analyze and use the newly discovered planet Pluto. He found this planet announced the First World War when Pluto entered Cancer in late summer of 1914, and saw a similar aspect when Pluto entered Leo in the fall of 1939. He developed the theory of typocosmy, a system of predicting the future from studying a person's personality type. On the 2nd of November 1939, Carl wrote to Dr. Heinrich Fessel, a man who worked for Himmler, making a prediction that there would be an attempt on Hitler's life between the 7th and 10th of November. On receipt of the letter, and skeptical about the claim, Fessel calmly filed it away. On the 8th of November, at 9:20 p.m., an explosion ripped through the Munich beer hall, where the National Socialists were celebrating their annual memorial of the failed 1923 beer hall putsch. Hitler, forced to start his speech 30 minutes earlier because of bad weather, had left the room at 7 minutes past 9, just 30 minutes earlier. The explosion killed 8 and injured 62. After hearing the news, Heinrich Fessel informed Hess about Kraft's prediction, which resulted in Kraft's arrest and interrogation.
What?
Poor guy.
Poor guy. Yeah, he's only interested in the planets. There's more to his story than I've just put there. Okay, you've seen the influence of Pluto over this, these 12 houses of the zodiac dividing Europe. Now, if we look at the position of Mars, the god of war, during the Danzig crisis and during the Blitzkrieg, and also the Battle of Greece, it takes about 6 weeks for Mars to move from one sign to another. So during this period of friction, trying to resolve the problem, we have Mars here when the Russians come in, and it just gives you an example of what we're talking about here. But the interesting one is number 2, the battle for France, the Blitzkrieg, because this is where Mars was. It was between Gemini and Cancer during these successful days of the lightning war on the 10th of May over the next 6 weeks, right over the areas of conflict. Fascinating. And then the Greece campaign, the battle for Greece, Mars is going all the way over Greece as the battle takes place. Now then, this will become important in a minute. You might think, well, that's just a coincidence. Now then, this is Barbarossa. This is where it all goes wrong for you guys. You were doing pretty well up to this point. Anyway, Mars just happens to be just here between, where is it? Pisces and Aries. Yeah, between Pisces and Aries. It happens to be between in Pisces at the start of Barbarossa. And then after 2 months, it goes retrograde. Mars goes retrograde, so it goes back on itself. It's going in the opposite direction. You don't want the god of war going in the opposite direction when you want to have a successful military campaign. And it's right over this area. Coincidence, maybe. But
after losing the Battle of Stalingrad, Hitler makes a remarkable statement to Alfred Jodl, Chief of the Operations Staff of the Armed Forces High Command. He turned to Jodl and said, "The god of war has gone over to the other side."
ooh,
In 1980, a Soviet military intelligence officer named Vladimir Rezin defected to the UK, where he wrote a book titled Icebreaker, Who Started the Second World War. In his book, he claims that the Soviet Union were preparing for a massive invasion towards the west into Germany and German-occupied territory in the late summer of 1941. The evidence he puts forward to support this claim comes in two parts. The fact that Marshal Stalin had increased his army from 1.8 million in 1939 to 5 million by the spring of 1941, with 18 million in reserve, and those troops were mobilizing along the German-Soviet border for an invasion prior to Barbarossa. Rezin, who used the pseudonym Viktor Zvolov, also claims that the Soviet troops and military commanders were predominantly given maps of German and German-occupied territories, neglecting maps of their own country, suggesting a strategy towards invasion rather than defense. Rezin also points out that the officer in charge of issuing maps was not reprehended by Stalin after Barbarossa for his lack of Soviet map issuance, as though he had followed orders accordingly. It is therefore suggested that the German preemptive offensive of Barbarossa in the summer was in some way like the Norway campaign, prompting the Germans to invade first, beating the Allied surprise.
That's an interesting perspective. A lot of people think, why did Hitler give the orders to attack the Soviet Union? Opening two fronts. And that's why, because they were going to attack him. They were gearing up for a big push westwards. Now this is interesting because some of the names of the military operations used on the Eastern Front, they use planetary names, but these are the only 4 planets that they use. And these are the 4 planets that we're interested in. Operation Uranus, successful Russian encirclement of German 6th Army in Stalingrad. Operation Saturn, proposed major attack following the Stalingrad encirclement. Operation Mars, failed major offensive against Reich. Operation Jupiter, second phase of failed major offensive against Reich. Now it's interesting they called Joseph Stalin Marshal Stalin, because Marshal is Mars-like activity. It's Mars concept, military. Stalin, Marshal Stalin. So that's a little pet name they gave him. Part of the big 3.
After persuading his interrogators of his innocence and genuine abilities, he was released and invited to the propaganda ministry to perform astrological studies. In January 1940, Joseph Goebbels put Kraft to work on deciphering the Nostradamus predictions for propaganda purposes. He translated a selection of Nostradamus quatrains, installing a favorable slant which promoted the future of Germany under Hitler's National Socialists. Pamphlets were produced in 6 different languages and disseminated all over Europe. When the Battle of Britain began, in July 1940, Goebbels' propaganda ministry used various covert radio stations to broadcast genuine Nostradamus predictions prior to the campaign. Once the attacks were underway, these radio broadcasts slowly introduced false interpretations which predicted a German victory.
Yeah.
A good example of the Nostradamus predictions commonly used during the war was Quatrain 2, 24, written in 1555, which mentions both Germany and Hester, which some thought referred to Hitler, but was in fact a reference to the river Danube. Beasts wild with hunger shall cross the rivers. Most of the fighting shall be close to the Hester. It shall result in the Great One being dragged in an iron cage, while the Germans shall be watching over the infant Rhine.
I mean, these quatrains, you can make anything out of them, really.
Oh, yeah.
I've never realized, I never thought how, why he was so famous. Maybe because he wrote so many, but he's bound to hit the dartboard occasionally. Have you heard that one before?
This one, no. Mm-mm. I knew about Hester and Nostradamus, that he mentioned that, but that specific one, no.
Mm.
When I look around to see how we can win the war, I see that there is only one sure path. We have no continental army which can defeat the German military power. Should Hitler not try invasion of Britain, there is one thing that will bring him back and bring him down, and that is an absolutely devastating, exterminating attack by very heavy bombers from this country upon the Nazi homeland. We must be able to overwhelm them by this means, without which I do not see a way through. We cannot accept any aim lower than air mastery. When can it be obtained? Once in office, Churchill desperately wanted to escalate the war. He went out of his way to ensure Hitler's offers of peace were not even aired among the people of Britain and its empire. It seems he was censoring correspondence coming from Germany to prop up his desire for war. According to David Irving, in his work, Churchill's War, he exposes Churchill's determination to silence Hitler's offers of peace. He discusses how, on the 20th of July 1940, Churchill received a decoded, intercepted message to Berlin from the German ambassador Hans Thompson in Washington, a message which stated that the British ambassador, Lord Lothian, was asked what the German peace offer was. Sensing his war may be jeopardized, Churchill sends an immediate telegram to Lord Halifax, asking him to put a stop to Lord Lothian's inquisitiveness. At the same time, he sends another telegram to Lord Lothian himself, ordering him to have no further dealings with the German ambassador, directly or indirectly. Later that day, Churchill contacted Sir Charles Portal, the then Commander-in-Chief of Bomber Command. He asked him when it would be possible to launch a savage bombing attack on Berlin. Portal's reply was that it wasn't possible at present, but could be in September, as a new class of heavy bombers would be available by then. He also made it clear to Churchill that if he started bombing German cities and towns, the Germans would retaliate by doing the same to Britain. Charles de Gaulle, on a visit to see Churchill a few weeks later, found Winston shaking his fist in the air, shouting, "Why won't you come?" This bewildered de Gaulle because he was unaware that Churchill was praying for German bombers to begin air raids on British cities. At that time, German air attacks were mainly confined to military and supply targets only, trying their best to keep the war away from civilian areas. This all changed on August the 24th, when a German bomber went off target and dropped its load on the east end of London instead of the oil tanks in Rotherhithe. The bombs which fell flattened a couple of old Dickensian tenants, blew in windows and fried a number of free-range chickens. But this was just what Churchill had been waiting for, a pretext for his own bombing campaign on German civilians. On receiving the news, Churchill immediately called Bomber Command and spoke to Sir Norman Bottomley, asking for a minimum of 100 bombers to attack Berlin that night in retaliation for the minor attack on the East End. Considering the political implications of this request, Churchill was acting no less of a dictator than Hitler. He bypassed the cabinet, parliament, and the air ministry, all because he single-handedly decided to ratchet up the conflict to the next level by killing innocent civilians. That night, the 25th of August, 1940, 100 bombers were sent over to Berlin. 30 managed to drop their bombs on the east end of Berlin, causing a considerable amount of damage and loss of life. Over the next 10 days, half a dozen raids were sent over Berlin, killing more civilians. However, Hitler refused to retaliate to Churchill's attacks, but instead pushed even harder with his peace offers, which unfortunately did not get through. Aware the stakes were now escalating and millions of lives were at stake, Hitler sent for his lawyer and asked him to visit the British ambassador, Sir Victor Mallet, in Stockholm, to make it clear to him what the German peace offer was. Unfortunately, Mallet had been given his orders from Churchill not to allow any journalists on the premises or to listen to anything concerning German offers. This is when Hitler sent for Hess to ask him to begin negotiations with his contacts in England and Scotland in order to get the message of peace across.
What's your review of that? Have you seen that perspective?
This Hess adventure was, let's say, a desperate last attempt to prevent what followed. Then I knew that, but I didn't know that Churchill was so determined to have his attack on the German civilians.
It's Churchill's determination to ratchet it up to the point where he can justify then sending all these heavy bombers to totally destroy the country. He wants the pretext. And just one plane went off target and dropped a few bombs on some old buildings. Nobody was killed in anything. It was just, but he used that as the pretext. It was, and he went past, he didn't even discuss it in Parliament, to something of that magnitude. It's an appalling situation.
Churchill, on the other hand, was determined to keep Hitler's peace offers out of bounds. He wanted war, and he wasn't going to let anything stop it. On the 4th of September, Hitler made a speech condemning the British bombing of German cities, warning if another 100 RAF bombers attacked Germany, he would send 1,000 to attack London. Now Churchill had Hitler exactly where he wanted him. He once again called Bomber Command to send another 100 bombers over to Germany, baiting the Germans. On the 6th of September, as promised, Hitler sent 1,000 bombers over to begin the Blitz on London. Blitz is German for lightning, and Uranus is considered to be the ancient god of the sky, with its capacity to unleash out of the blue bolts of powerful lightning. That night, 1,000 Londoners perished in the raid, while Churchill sat comfortably out in Oxford in one of the focus group's members' country retreats. Churchill avoided most of the air raids in London because he was given the deciphered information ahead of time, only to return the next morning for a convenient photo opportunity.
Mm.
As a result of initiating this terror bombing campaign on German towns and cities, a conservative estimate of around 600,000 civilians died as a result, leaving millions homeless. The British also suffered with around 60,000 dead in retaliation. On the 21st of June 1941, Churchill had a conversation with John Winant, the US ambassador to Great Britain. During the conversation, he made it clear what his sole purpose was. I have only one purpose, the destruction of Hitler, and my life is much simplified thereby. If Hitler invaded hell, I would make at least a favourable reference to the devil in the House of Commons. Hitler's peace offers. Germany is entirely ready to renounce aggressive weapons of every sort if the armed nations on their part will destroy their aggressive weapons within a specified period, and if their use is forbidden by an international convention, 1933. The German government is ready to take an active part in all efforts which may lead to the practical limitations of armaments. The German government is ready to agree to any limitation which leads to abolition of the heaviest arms, especially suited for aggression, 1935. By far the most important task, in my opinion, is the creation of not only a belief in, but also a sense of European security. The Treaty of Versailles is now regarded as obsolete. The most important condition, however, for a real revival of economic life in and outside of Europe is the establishment of an unconditionally guaranteed peace and of a sense of security on the part of the individual nations. This security will not only be rendered possible by the final sanctioning of the European status, but above all the reduction in armaments to a reasonable and economically tolerable level. The 6th of October 1939. After the initial German military success in the summer of 1940, Hitler was purported to have made yet another peace offer to Great Britain. With Churchill now in charge, any proposal of peace would not be entertained. Although Hitler's 1940 peace offer is not widely publicized, Martin Allen, in his book, The Hitler-Hess Deception, sheds light on the offer. The British Empire retains all its colonies and delegations. The fundamentals of Germany's continental sphere of interest must be recognized. All questions concerning the Mediterranean and its French, Belgium, and Dutch colonies are open to discussion. Poland, a Poland state must exist. The former Czechoslovakia state will remain independent, but under German protection.
Interesting peace offer.
Mm.
Why wouldn't they accept? Which is bizarre.
Yeah, that is, you know, Joe Sixpack always has to suffer because of crazy ideas of crazy men. Yeah.
That's why
I think that was somehow an ego trip of Churchill as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah,
I understand he was bought by the huge banking cartels. I understand that. But you need to have that psychological flaw of an overinflated ego.
Yeah, they also reckon he was a bit of a psychopath. I mean, his Gallipoli campaign in the Dardanelles and the First World War, it was a complete disaster and cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of men. And he was told it was going to be a disaster, but his pig-headedness just went for it. He just kept pushing it. Yeah. Yeah. But this is why Hess flew over to Scotland, because these peace offers just weren't getting through. So Hess flew to Scotland to try and arrange a meeting with the Scottish aristocracy tried to, because he thought they would be out of range of Winston Churchill, but unfortunately they weren't.
1941, 5 weeks before Barbarossa, Hess decided to take a plane on a solo flight to Scotland. He was trying to negotiate a peace deal with the Scottish aristocracy. Hess was also deeply concerned about Hitler's plan to invade the Soviet Union, which would essentially create two fronts, a situation which ultimately led to Germany's defeat in World War I. When Churchill was informed of Hess's flight and subsequent crash landing, he ordered him to be arrested. Hess never got the chance to negotiate peace with the Duke of Hamilton or any other influential figure. Instead, he spent the rest of his life behind bars, ironically being sentenced to life in prison for crimes against peace. Judeo-Masonic conspiracy. From early on in the German National Socialist movement, Hitler and his associates considered the Jews and Freemasons to be part of the same international clique. They were under the impression that they were working together behind the scenes to bring about a global socialist system of absolute control. The Protestant movement, aware of the Catholic Jesuits, decided to create their own version, a secret order, an army of influential men able to infiltrate society, promoting their beliefs, free from papal rule. Using a similar structure as the Templars, they called themselves Freemasons. During this time, much of Europe prohibited Jews from certain occupations. However, they were welcome within Freemasonry due to their opposition towards Catholicism. This new intellectual army was uniting Christians and Jews against Rome. There is a great deal of Jewish symbolism within Freemasonry, and generally a greater ratio of Jews inside lodges as opposed to outside. Let us remember that Christianity and Freemasonry are essentially incompatible to such an extent that to become united with one means being divorced from the other. Let us therefore expose Freemasonry as the enemy of God, of the Church, and of our motherland. Pope Leo XIII. We want to build up a new state. That is why the others hate us so much today. They are, after all, plutocrats, in which a tiny clique of capitalists dominate the masses, and this, naturally, in close cooperation with international Jews and Freemasons. Adolf Hitler. A year after Hitler came to power, the National Socialists ruled that any Freemason who did not leave their lodge prior to the 30th of January 1933 would not be allowed to join the Nazi Party. Hermann Göring followed this by calling for the voluntary dissolvement of all lodges. Any which did not comply were forced to close, having their assets confiscated by the Gestapo. With the help of its international connections and entanglements, Freemasonry interferes in the foreign policy relationships of all peoples and pursues, through governmental leaders, secret foreign and world policies which escape the control of these in government. Freemasonry is tightly allied with Jewry, and not just through its organization. Even the symbolism of Freemasonry points to Jewry through its customs, and to Hebrew through its words and signs, as its real origin. The Masonic conceptual universe is a reflection of Jewish Near East images and concepts. A meeting of Masons, Roosevelt and Churchill, the Tehran Conference 1943. Coincidentally, the common denominator which connects the leaders of the Allied forces are Judaism and Freemasonry. Churchill, Roosevelt and Truman were all high-level Freemasons, and the initial Bolshevik government of the Soviet Union of 1917 were 85% Jewish. So the big three were all part of this international clique which Hitler and the German National Socialists were concerned about. When Roosevelt died on the 12th of April 1945, his position as president was taken over by Harry S. Truman, another high-degree Freemason. Truman, who sanctioned the dropping of the first 2 atomic bombs on Japanese civilians, had an allegiance to Freemasonry which appears to have superseded his role as president. Although I hold the highest civil honor in the world, I have always regarded my rank and title as a past Grand Master of Masons, the greatest honor that had ever come to me. Harry S. Truman. In August 1945, 2 atomic bombs were dropped over Japan, one on Hiroshima and one on Nagasaki, both with a significant Catholic population. The city of Nagasaki was evangelized by Jesuits in 1549 and became an important Catholic center in the Far East. The Nagasaki bomb fell on the Urakami district, right in the heart of the Catholic area, killing over 35,000 people, including 70% of the 12,000 Catholics who lived there. This was a true Holocaust by definition. Holocaust definition. Destruction or slaughter on a mass scale, especially caused by fire or nuclear war.
You see, there seems to be an underlining friction going off between Freemasons and the Catholic Church in the background.
Yeah.
Because you've got to remember that it was the Catholic Church which promoted the fascist dictators in the first place. Well, they had a hand in it. So the Freemasons are dropping these bombs, nuclear bombs, on the Catholic district of Nagasaki, maybe to sending a message to the Pope saying, we're in control now.
Mm-hmm.
More of your...
Why do you think they didn't drop it on Germany? Is it too close?
Well, Germany,
is it too close, the nuclear fallout, or what?
Now, Germany had already they'd already taken over Germany. It had already surrendered by the time they...
but I mean, still, to make a point.
Well, they'd already bombed it back into the Stone Age. There was nothing left. I mean, 60% of your cities were in rubble.
Yeah.
So they'd already moved up. They'd already made the point, and they had a lot of their own troops in there trying to sort out the chaos.
With the German National Socialists under their messiah, Adolf Hitler, aligning themselves with the energetic characteristics of the planet Uranus. And as Uranus is the planet associated with unexpected, out-of-the-blue events, new technology and rebellious revolutions, sometimes of a violent nature, it makes perfect sense that they would look towards uranium as the source to fuel their atomic bomb project. The German secret atomic bomb project, which began in April 1939, was named Uranverein, Uranium Club. At the beginning of the war, German scientists led the world in most aspects of physics. Germany was way ahead, especially after Otto Hahn and Franz Strassmann had achieved nuclear fission, splitting of the atom, early in 1939, by bombarding uranium atoms with neutrons. When we consider Judaism is synonymous with the number 6 and Christianity the number 4, the only date which would truly reflect this alliance is a date loaded with 6s and 4s. D-Day, the Allied invasion of Western Europe, took place on the 6th of the 6th, 1944, at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Why is Christianity number 4?
Christianity number 4 is the glyph. The glyph for Jupiter is a number 4.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, 4th day of the week, and it's also a 4-pointed star they use as as their symbol. Whereas the Jews, you see, use number 6, and Saturn has its hexagonal weather pattern on its north pole that the Sumerians just happened to know about.
Yeah.
Maybe they had a space program.
Yeah, Enki told them.
Yeah, well, that's it. Enki told them.
Churchill's obsession with defeating Hitler at all costs eventually got the better of him when he admitted in the preface of The Gathering Storm in 1948 that the European and global situation was up against a greater danger than those they had just overcome. He was, of course, referring to the spread of communism. The human tragedy reaches its climax in the fact that after all the exertions and sacrifices of hundreds of millions of people, and the victories of the righteous cause will have still not found peace or security, and that we lie in the grip of even worse perils than those we have surmounted. The only conclusion one can come to when analysing this part of history, and the part Churchill played in it, is one of sheer disbelief that one man indebted to handouts from international finance was allowed to take on dictatorial powers in order to pursue his own personal war with Germany, an unnecessary war which cost the lives of around 100 million people, which ultimately bankrupted the British Empire and turned Western civilization on its head, leaving Eastern Europe to the mercy of one of the worst mass murderers in human history. Although the reality of World War II is far removed from the Hollywood version of history, most people in Britain and the West still regard Churchill as the greatest Briton who ever lived, priming them for potential future conflicts due to their unwillingness to accept their hero's semi-psychopathic responsibility for some of the worst atrocities of the 20th century. The only winners of World War II were, of course, that small clique of international financiers, who many prominent men have spoken about, a clique who not only made a fortune from the war, but managed to consolidate their power and influence further, making the world a great deal safer for the expansion of usury. I believe now that Hitler and the German people did not want war, but we declared war on Germany, intent on destroying it, in accordance with our principle of balance of power, and we were encouraged by the Americans around Roosevelt. We ignored Hitler's pleadings not to enter into war. Now we are forced to realize that Hitler was right. Attorney General Sir Hartley Shawcross, March the 16th, 1984. I see no reason why this war must go on. I am grieved to think of the sacrifices it will claim. I would like to avert them. Adolf Hitler, 1940. Winston Churchill agrees. We entered the war of our own free will, without ourselves being directly assaulted, 1943. The last thing Hitler wanted was to produce another great war. Sir Basil Liddell Hart, The History of the Second World War. We made a monster, a devil out of Hitler. Therefore, we couldn't disavow it after the war. After all, we mobilized the masses against the devil himself. So we were forced to play our part in this diabolical scenario after the war. In no way we could have pointed out to our people that the war was only an economical preventative measure. US Foreign Minister James Baker, 1992. After visiting these places, you can easily understand how that within a few years, Hitler will emerge from the hatred that surrounds him now as one of the most significant figures who ever lived. John F. Kennedy's personal diary, the 1st of August, 1945. I therefore suspect that any tangible evidence found to support the existence of Atlantis will be kept under lock and key, only to be considered by mainstream academia as mythology. If they ever allow such evidence to surface, it could give credence to some of the work and theories undertaken by the German National Socialists, especially Himmler's SS Ananu. The race issue.
The interesting thing about John F. Kennedy as well, he was a Catholic. He was the only Catholic president to ever sit in the White House. And he was assassinated.
Mm.
And Lyndon Johnson, who took over from him, was a Freemason. And so were, I think it was 3 or 4 members of the Warren Commission. So that's just an interesting twist perspective. And there's never been a Catholic president since.
Mm-hmm.
After 1945, a war which became largely dominated by race, costing the lives of over 60 million people, a program to diffuse racial tension was created. The newly formed United Nations was asked to consider the race issue, and as part of the move towards globalization, they promoted a new common consensus towards race, suggesting that all humanity is descended from one stock alone. Scientists have reached general agreement in recognizing that mankind is one, that all men belong to the same species, Homo sapiens. It is further generally agreed among scientists that all men are probably derived from the same common stock, UNESCO 1950.
So there we have it. But just a little point here about the 30 degrees east of Cairo, the Aries part of the globe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you look at it and the history of it, the deaths in Aries caused by war and famines, it's as though there's an outside program to eradicate these aggressive people. Maybe there is a plan to de-aggressify the planet for the globalization project.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you go further south and you have all the east side of Africa, Yemen. This is all part of the 30 degrees east.
Mm-hmm.
Lots and lots of, but maybe it's the knock-on effect of being an Aries kind of person. Questions? So the future. What does the future have in store? So if we go by this big clock, the big timepiece that never lies, we're now entering this new age, ruled by Saturn and shared rulership by the planet Uranus, rebellious revolutions, technology, and also dominating these mini epochs is Mars, martial-like activity. So maybe we're going to see a lot of military martial-like activity over the next few years.
Mm. I heard some people say that there will be a lot of, it will be upside down for a couple of years, and the first stabilizing factors they see coming in around 2027.
Yeah, this is more or less where I'm getting to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's as though we're going through the tribulation period.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a 7-year tribulation, complete upheaval, transformation of one paradigm into another. That's a paradigm shift of Jupiterian optimism into Saturnian order and control. So if we go back to this map here, Pluto moves into Aquarius late 2023 and permanently in 2024, because it retrogrades a little bit. It goes backwards and forwards for a while. And so as Karl Kraft pointed out, he pointed out that when Pluto moves into a new sign, there's a great chance of transformation, war, and death. So the big potential for conflict, especially in this area here, the east side of Turkey, and the west side of Turkey and the east side of Europe. So we shall see. Just another thing here. This is the 84-year revolutionary cycle of Uranus. I've tried to put this as in some kind of way that you can understand. This is a 15-year period. The American Revolution took a long time to get going and geared up. So we've got 1769 all the way to 1784, and the discovery of Uranus was in the latter part of this revolutionary period, 1776 in the middle, of course. So every 84 years, Uranus goes back to that position it was in, which around the sun, which its influence affected us in this particular way. So then we had 84 years later, we had the American Civil War. And 84 years after that, we had World War II and the Korean War. And 84 years after that is 2021 to 2036. So Uranus is going to be influencing this period, this 15-year period in some way. There's going to be a lot of revolution and rebellion using new technology and all sorts of Uranus characteristics. And don't forget, the control system are very orientated around Saturn. They're very using satanic energies to keep control of people. When I say satanic energies, I mean Saturnian energies.
Yeah.
There's lots of different angles to it. There's some people that are born with very strong Saturn alignments and Saturn energies. The old traditional Judaic religion is very Saturn orientated. Anybody who works in government, police structures, organizations of control and restriction, they're all Saturnian. So it's going to be an interesting time over the next 10 years. So there we have it.
Yeah.
We have the book in German and English.
And I will not use that in my title.
Yeah, whatever.
Because YouTube will block it right away.
Well, I'm okay with the English version. It just seems the German version,
okay.
The English version. I've got loads of videos on my own website with the English version. There doesn't seem to be a problem with that. So I'm not sure what you want to do. Maybe just use your discretion. And I don't think there was anything offensive in that. No,
I don't. But you know how these fact checkers work, yeah?
The fact checkers.
Somebody needs to check the fact checkers.
The fact checkers. Oh yeah, we love the fact checkers.
Okay. So is that the end of your presentation?
That's the end. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I understand. Can you end the screen share?
Yes, I think so. Stop share. There we are.
Yeah, great.
Oh,
thank you so much for doing this. There is a lot of work in there. I can see that. And wow. And how long have we been going? I have no idea.
Yeah,
almost 3 hours. No, 2 hours. No, 3.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
3 hours.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel for anybody who sits through that.
But you know what? You can reset through it and you can watch it in batches.
Exactly, yes. Well, I
Yeah.
think you've been a great sport to sit with me through this and endure it. Did you get anything out of it?
Yes, definitely. And I tell you what, I will have to watch this several times. And the same is, I did 2 interviews with Pierre Sabak, and one of them is also around 3 hours. And I have to watch them again and again. And every time I watch it again, there are little kernels in there that I forgot the first time, or that I did not, so.
Well, I'm going to use the presentation in some way and try and put it together and just put it as a package on my own website sometime. But at the moment, I'm just going to relax for a few days.
Yeah. That is a wonderful idea, to relax for a few days.
Of course. Well, it's always a pleasure to see you again. And I always keep an eye on your channel. Some interesting guests you have, some great topics. Let's hope the world goes in a positive way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Rather than a rocky
now,
road.
I'm quietly optimistic.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Keep the optimistic energy alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
You resonate good energy. Good energy goes out and eventually comes back to you.
Exactly. Yeah. So, wow, what a presentation! Thank you again. That was really a lot of work. So that was it, guys. Night flight for today with a wonderful Brian Taylor. Stay safe from tyranny, stay sound out there, and enjoy your life. Until next time, bye-bye.